I first saw Rhea during a college cultural event, a blur of color, music, and laughter. Amidst all that noise, she stood out, not because she was the loudest or the most glamorous, but because she was utterly present. There was something quiet about her, something still. I watched her laugh at something her friend said, her eyes closing slightly, the sound genuine and full. In that instant, something shifted in me. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing her everywhere, at the campus library with her nose buried in thick textbooks, at the coffee stall holding a cup of tea like it carried the weight of her thoughts, and sometimes alone under the neem tree, sketching in a worn-out journal. I didn't speak to her at first. I simply observed, admired, felt drawn in without understanding why. Our first conversation happened by accident. She dropped her notes outside the lecture hall, papers scattering like dry leaves. I helped her gather them, and she smiled, grateful, soft-spoken, polite. From there, things unfolded slowly. Study groups turned into occasional lunch breaks. Random chats became daily texts. We shared stories about classes we hated, music we loved, and people we pretended to like. She told me, once on a quiet evening walk back from the library, that she didn't believe in love anymore. "It's just too much," she said, eyes distant. "People get tired of each other. Or worse, they lie." Her voice didn't crack, but I could feel the wound underneath. I never asked about the details, and she never offered them. But from that day, I knew she was carrying something heavy, and I wanted, foolishly perhaps, to be the one to help her put it down. As our bond grew, so did my feelings. I never meant for it to happen. I didn't fall for her like people fall in love. In the movies. It was slower, deeper, like roots growing into the earth. I'd find excuses to meet her, to stay just a bit longer in her world. I started remembering little things about her, how she always left a half sip of coffee in her cup, how she chewed on pens while thinking, how she tapped her foot when nervous. But Rhea? She never changed. She treated me kindly, shared her time, her thoughts, but never her heart. There were no flirtations, no accidental touches, no hints. I waited, hoped, read into silences, tried to believe that maybe she just needed time. That day, under a warm winter sun, sitting beside her on the campus bench, I realized something. I really liked her. Not just her laugh or her eyes or her voice, but her, completely. But she wasn't ready to accept me, and maybe she never would be. The days that followed were a strange mix of hope and heartache. Rhea's presence in my life was constant, yet always just out of reach, like a song you hum but never quite remember the lyrics to. She messaged every morning, shared memes, asked about my day. On some evenings, we'd walk together after classes, our conversations flowing so easily that it felt like we were meant to be something more. But just when I'd start to believe we were moving towards something deeper, she'd pull away. If I lingered a little too long on a compliment, she'd laugh and change the subject. If I hinted at how I felt, she'd brush it off with a joke or a distracted smile. Once, at a movie night with friends, she rested her head lightly on my shoulder. My heart raced. I thought maybe finally something had shifted. But later that night, when I asked if it meant anything, she replied with a simple, "Don't overthink it. You're just really comforting to be around." Comforting. Like a pillow. A warm cup of tea. Something you turn to, not for love, but for familiarity. I told myself I was imagining things. That she wasn't playing games, just afraid to feel again. But even that thought began to wear thin as weeks turned into months. She confided in me constantly, about her studies, her insecurities, her strained relationship with her father. I listened, supported, encouraged. She said I made her feel safe, and I mistook that safety for affection. I turned down plans with friends, stayed up late to help her with assignments, skipped a job interview just to attend her art exhibition. Every sacrifice felt like proof that I was earning her trust, her love. I was investing everything I had, emotionally, mentally, into something that never really had a name. Then came the evening that changed everything. We were sitting by the campus lake, watching the reflection of stars shimmer in the dark water. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Rhea," I said quietly, "I think I've been falling for you." She turned to look at me, her face unreadable. A silence settled between us, heavy and cold. "You're sweet," she replied gently. "But you know I'm not ready for anything. I thought you understood that." I nodded, managing a small smile. I didn't want to guilt her, I didn't want to lose her. But inside, I was crumbling. She kept texting after that night, kept calling, kept inviting me into her world like nothing had changed. But something had. Something vital. I was starting to see the truth behind the comfort she took in me. She didn't love me. She loved the way I made her feel about herself. After that night by the lake, something in me shifted. I didn't say it aloud, but I began to detach. Slowly, deliberately. I replied to her messages with shorter sentences. I stopped rearranging my days for her. I let the silence stretch between us when once I would have rushed to fill it. She didn't protest. In fact, she barely seemed to notice, and that hurt even more. Eventually, graduation came. I moved to a new city, started a job that demanded all my attention. I immersed myself in work, not to forget Rhea, but to finally choose myself. It was painful at first, untangling her from my thoughts, but as months passed, the ache dulled. I didn't hate her. I didn't resent her. I just stopped waiting. Then, one afternoon nearly a year later, I received an invitation to a friend's wedding back in our hometown. I almost declined, but something in me, curiosity maybe, pushed me to attend. The moment I walked into the venue, I saw her. Rhea stood across the hall in a soft pink dress, surrounded by familiar faces. Her eyes scanned the crowd lazily, until they found me. There was a brief flicker of surprise and then something else, something warmer. She approached, hesitant but smiling. "You look different," she said. I did. I had changed. The insecurity in my voice was gone. My shoulders no longer slouched under unspoken weight. I carried myself differently now, not because I had something to prove, but because I had nothing left to chase. We talked like old friends. She asked about my job, my new apartment, my life. I answered without embellishment. No lingering need for her approval. No hidden hope. Later, during the reception, she found me again. This time, her tone was softer, almost shy. "It's weird," she admitted, eyes glancing down at her glass. "Seeing you like this. I don't know why, but it's nice." She laughed nervously. "I used to think you were too good for me. Maybe I wasn't ready back then." There. It was, the words I once begged the universe to hear. Now, spoken freely, casually. "I've been thinking," she added, "maybe we should try again. You and me." I studied her face. She was sincere. But was it the me she wanted, or the man I had become without her? I didn't answer immediately, just smiled and said, "Maybe." But even as I said it, something in my chest didn't move. No rush of adrenaline, no burst of hope. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, and yet, here it was, stripped of magic, hollow. She agreed to what I had once longed for, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a question I was no longer sure I wanted answered. For the first few weeks after she said maybe, everything felt surreal. We met twice a week, sometimes at a cozy cafe where early morning light spilled across our table, and at other times beneath strings of fairy lights in a quiet park. I listened to her laugh without reservation, held her hand as she spoke of future dreams and felt that familiar warmth I once chased so desperately. But beneath the surface, my mind churned. I searched for authenticity in her smiles, sincerity in her words, and found shadows instead. One evening, as soft rain tapped against the cafe window, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Curious, I glanced at it, screenshots of her chat with her college roommate. I frowned as I read. He's exactly who I wanted him to be. Successful, confident, completely mine now. I can't believe it took this long, but I'm not settling for that version of him anymore. My heart thudded, and a cold clarity spread through me. She hadn't fallen for me. She'd fallen for what I had become. Emotions I hadn't felt since graduation. Anger, hurt, disappointment, tangled inside my chest. I excused myself, stepping into the night, breathing in the damp air, tasting betrayal on my tongue. Flashbacks came unbidden. The afternoons she leaned on my shoulder, the midnight calls when she needed comfort, the sacrifices I made without complaint. All those moments felt suddenly distorted, as if they'd been staged for her benefit, tokens in an unspoken bargain. I collapsed onto a bench, staring at the empty streetlights, wishing I could erase the pain of every genuine word I'd shared. When I returned, Rhea's eyes searched mine, expecting joy. She took my hand, and for a heartbeat I felt the pull to lie, to reassure her that love conquers all. But honesty pressed forward instead. I let her hand slip away and studied her face, still framed by the gentle glow of the cafe. I read, "The messages," I said quietly. "I saw how you talked about me behind my back." Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, as though saving an apology. "I thought," I continued, voice steady but soft, "that you loved me for who I was, not what I'd become." I paused, the words heavy and true. I was wrong. Expected her to beg forgiveness, to confess that she'd made a mistake, but she simply looked down, eyes glistening, and nodded. We parted that night without fanfare. No dramatic confrontation, no tearful pleas, just two souls drifting apart under the quiet hum of the city. In the days that followed, I replayed our time together, searching for signs I'd missed. I realized that genuine love doesn't hinge on transformation. It thrives in acceptance. And though my feelings for her ran deep, I understood that self-respect demands honesty above all. Now I walk past that same cafe alone, its lights welcoming but hollow. I carry our memories like pages of a book I once treasured, but no longer need to reread. I really liked her that day, and she wasn't ready to accept me. When she finally did, I wasn't ready anymore. And somehow, that feels like enough.